So in this video, I want to talk to you about how to actually manage your scientific lab. I think that this is a really important thing that nobody ever teaches you about in most institutions, but I think it's very important. And I'm going to treat it like a business or like an organization, like most of you probably would sort of treat a business or an organization. And I'm going to suggest that you can manage it in very similar ways, and you probably should in terms of managing it. So, if you don't know me, I'm associate professor. I'm Professor Dave Massock. I'm associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor for to help you out. So, ultimately, you probably just want to grow your influence, and that's probably the most important thing. But to grow your influence, scientific influence, you probably need resources to actually grow this influence. So, what are resources? Resources are things that are like financial resources. That's the revenue that's coming in, grants and bursaries and different things like that. Human resources, who is actually working at your lab, who's your graduate students, and probably your reputation is also a good resource as well. And all of those things are really important. They sort of compound together and they interact together to grow your lab and so that you'll actually have a little bit more influence if you actually sort of manage these different resources properly. So how do you actually manage these resources and grow them? So I'm borrowing this. There's actually an old literature now on the resource-based view and management, and we've talked about this stuff for a long time. And what you should be thinking about, and I'm also combining this with other literature that I'm aware about, is combining it with the sort of logic of exploration exploitation. Actually, this comes from machine learning, but it was borrowed in management. And what we think about is looking at how you dedicate the amount of time that you have to different resources, or how much resources you have, and dedicating it to different things. So what you should be balancing is a little bit of mostly sort of growing what you already have, right? So that's the exploitation part of it, exploiting resources, and then growing some new thing, something a little bit different or unusual. That's the exploration part of it. And so dedicating some amount of resources to that. So to manage your lab and to grow your lab and have more influence, you probably should be looking at a balance of 10 to 20% of doing something that's unusual and weird and that doesn't have really a point at this moment, that is really pie in the sky, and then 80% of your resources to something that is tried and true that you've done before. It's kind of what I'm doing with this whole reciprocity project, right? I'm dedicating 10 to 20% of my resources to this sort of side thing. Maybe it's going to grow into something bigger. I don't know at this moment. And 80% of my time to real, like what I've been doing for a long time. My sort of real research. That's an important sort of balance to have. And a lot of companies actually do this that are very successful in R&D. Google, 3M, actually 3M has been doing this for a long, long time. And they're sort of looking for this balance of, what is a crazy pie in the sky thing that might be the next big thing, but not dedicating a tremendous amount of resources to it because you're going to go bankrupt, right? Like you're going to run out of resources. So that's an important thing to think about. Another really important thing to think about is the culture that you actually have. And culture can go really quickly, and it takes a long time to build and a long time to invest in it, and finding the right balance of pushing sort of people and making people sort of work in just loving what they're doing and working and pushing, but also having a good time. And that right balance is a real struggle for all of us in terms of what is the right balance of sort of pushing things, but also having a good time when you're doing it. And so finding that and thinking about that, I think is going to be helpful for you in terms of balancing this culture, no matter even if you have a couple of people or a lot of people in it. Because it could go quickly. That's one thing we know about culture is it could turn in a dime and it could go very sour very quickly. If you bring in the wrong person, or that there is just a wrong set of events that happen, it can go not very good very quickly. You also want to encourage, I think this is important that is not talked about as much, is encourage all of your employees or people that are working for you or people that are part of your lab to look out for each other and to worry about their mental health and to worry about like them doing really well, because you don't have to do everything, right? That's an important thing to think about. If you're sort of the lead PI or whatnot, you don't have to do everything. You want other people to look out for each other. That's impossible to do. You know, the CEO of the I don't know, of Walmart, for example, they don't know everybody at the company, but they're trying to create an organization where everybody is looking out for each other and making sure that they're doing a really good job. And so that's what you should be thinking about is how can I make sure that other people are looking out for other people and it's actually doing its thing without that. You know, the another important thing is, you know, and this is a challenge that we have, is to get people to work, and you know, help them out in terms of doing the jobs that they should be doing, but and also taking a step back and letting them learn their own lessons and know, you know, how troubling it is when they learn their own lessons. So having that right balance of, you know, helping and being helpful, I think this is something where I struggle with because I tend to be overly helpful, and I tend to intervene more, and I need to pull back and I need to say, you know, you make your own mistakes, and as they learn and develop, as people learn and develop, I think that's very, very helpful for them to become their own independent selves. It's something that you learn as a parent. And it's also something that you learn in terms of interacting with other people, and that is important for them to grow as you know, their own independent scholars, where they're making their own mistakes and figuring it out as they go, in not interfering as much and sort of being overly helpful. I think that's actually problematic when you're overly helpful. Because you really are doing them a disservice in terms of having people actually grow and develop on their own and be independent. So that struggle is super hard for all of us, in that balance, especially if you're altruistic or you have the tendency to help. You're going to want to be too helpful, and I don't think that's healthy in any sort of way. And the last thing is, you know, having extra resources, having that little bit of extra resources, that's everything. And that has enormous amount of power. That's one thing that we do know is, you know, if you have a certain amount of resources to run your you know, lab, your organization, all of that's going to probably be eaten up. Most of it's going to be eaten up in terms of operating costs. But then you might have a little bit of extra. And that little bit of extra that you get, that has a lot of power in terms of dictating where things are going to go. And you have to really pay attention to that in terms of the influence, having too much influence from those little bit of extra resources. So pay attention to that and know that it might get swayed very easily from just a little bit of resources. And, you know, you might pay attention to that and you might be aware of that and sort of guide the process. But also, you know, if somebody offers you a little bit of resources, you know, a grant, for example, for $10,000, don't get swayed to go in a different direction because of that small grant. That's going to be very influential and it might sort of steer you in a direction that you don't want to go. So with that, give me a thumbs up, do subscribe to the YouTube channel, take care, and have a wonderful day. Bye.